At my 18th birthday party, the imposter heiress, back from the dead, decided to expose me. She claimed I was the fake. She pointed a finger right at my face and screamed. I slowly swirled the wine in my glass. Then I played the 10-year-old recording of our nanny, making a deal with a kidnapper. "Sweetheart," I said with a smirk, "that pigsty stench on you? Not even Hermes can cover that up." Later, the day she jumped from that building, I smiled for the live stream camera. The family is sponsoring a free funeral service. Jump, and the burial is on us. So this is what it's like to die. There was no life flashing before my eyes, none of the memories people talk about. Just an endless, suffocating darkness pressing down on my eyelids. The last bit of foul, pigsty air was squeezed from my lungs. A ragged, wheezing sound, like a broken accordion, escaped my throat. Then total silence. The world became terrifyingly quiet. And in that all-consuming silence, a voice, like a needle dipped in poison, pierced through my fading consciousness. Arbella. She was always different. That elegance, that class, it's just so natural. It's in her bones. That was my birth mother. The regal, sophisticated voice of Mrs. Shun, crackling with static from a cheap television in some corner. But every word was clear, like a dull knife sawing through me. She was praising Daisy Lynn. No, they call her Bella Shun now. The daughter of our nanny, Mrs. Lynn. The thief who took my name, my life, my parents, even the man who, before I ever met him, was supposed to be my fiancé. And me? What was my name? No one remembered. I was just some woman a lonely old man in the mountains traded a few sacks of corn for. I was livestock, tied to a post, fighting pigs for scraps, forced to pop out one baby after another. My only value was in my numbly spread legs and the children who crawled out of me, each one of them marked by the same pigsty stench. Born with class, my mother's voice drifted on, filled with satisfaction. What a joke! She'd never guessed that the natural class of her precious daughter was cultivated with my blood, my rotted youth, and every mouthful of slop I choked down in that hell. A hatred more piercing than death itself exploded in my consciousness. Just as that hate was about to tear me apart. Ring, ring, ring. Ring, ring, ring. An alarm, so shrill it felt like it could shatter my eardrums, seared my nerves like a hot poker. I snapped my eyes open. There was no low, filthy mud brick ceiling. No cold, pig shit-scented wind blowing through a broken window. Instead, I saw a pristine white ceiling. A crystal chandelier with a pink lace shade cast a soft, warm glow. The air was filled with the faint, sweet scent of gardenias. I was like a beached fish, my chest heaving as I gasped for this impossibly clean air. My lungs expanded greedily, each breath a painful, dizzying reminder that I had survived. My eyes darted around the room. A huge princess bed covered in a thick, pink velvet blanket, surrounded by stuffed animals. Against the wall stood a floor-to-ceiling white wardrobe, its glass doors displaying rows of exquisite little dresses. On the vanity, expensive children's skincare products were neatly arranged next to a pink, diamond-encrusted Hello Kitty alarm clock. The alarm clock. My gaze locked onto it. The pink plastic shell, the glittering diamond cat face smiling so innocently. Its two thin black hands pointed to a time that made my blood run cold. 2:50 p.m. Exactly 10 minutes before the kidnapper would knock on the door. My heart hammered against my ribs, so loud it hurt my ears, threatening to shatter my chest and leap out. I was back. I was really back. Back to when I was 8 years old. Back before the nightmare began. Back to these last, fatal 10 minutes. I shot up in bed, my small body trembling from the shock. I looked down and saw I was wearing a new pair of light blue silk pajamas trimmed with lace. My fingers were slender and fair, my nails trimmed and clean, without a trace of dirt. None of the calluses and cracks from years of scrubbing laundry and digging in the mud. This wasn't a dream. A hot surge of emotion rushed to my nose. I bit my lip, using all my strength to push back the tears and weakness that threatened to overwhelm me. Crying? There was no time to cry. Every second was precious. Every second could save my life. In my last life at this exact moment, Mrs. Lynn, that venomous old hag, would knock on the door with a plate of sliced fruit. She'd use that sickeningly sweet, baby talk voice. "Miss Scarlett, have some fruit. I cut it just for you." Then she'd accidentally spill juice on my pajamas. Then she'd smoothly suggest, "Oh dear, it's dirty. Let me get you a new dress." And then she'd pull a white princess dress, one she had prepared beforehand, from the closet and hand it to me. Finally, the doorbell would ring. The door would open, and a man with a scar on his face, pretending to be from the water company, would force his way in. My nightmare would begin. This time, that doorbell would never ring for me. I shot off the bed like a cannonball, my bare feet landing on the cool, smooth wood floor, the sensation so real it made me want to cry. I rushed to the closed door, my small hands slick with nervous sweat. The knob slipped in my grip for a second. Click. The door opened. Out in the hallway, with its plush carpet and warm-colored wallpaper, was Daisy. She had her back to me, tiptoeing and craning her neck, sneaking a peek down toward the living room. She was wearing a faded floral dress, the cuffs frayed, and a pair of ill-fitting plastic sandals. Hearing the door, she spun around. The jealousy on her face was instantly replaced by a forced, timid attempt to be pleasing. "Scarlett," she mumbled, but her eyes were glued to the room behind me, to the sparkling toys and beautiful clothes. Her greed was practically dripping from her gaze. "Daisy," I said, forcing the most innocent, angelic smile an 8-year-old could manage. My voice was soft and sweet. I beckoned to her with an air of intimacy she couldn't refuse. "Come in. I have to show you something cool." Daisy froze, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. Usually, I, the young miss, wasn't mean to her, but I certainly wasn't friendly either. I mostly just ignored her with the casual arrogance of a spoiled child. My sudden warmth made her instinctively wary. What is it?" she stammered, not moving, though the desire in her eyes only intensified. "Just come in. Hurry." I added a touch of a demanding, spoiled tone to my voice, stepping aside to reveal the open door of my walk-in closet. "Look. My mom just bought me a new dress. It's a super pretty princess dress. It has tons of sparkles, and it even lights up. Like a fairy from TV. Princess dress." Those 2 words were a magic hook that snagged all of Daisy's reason. Her faint suspicion was drowned in a tidal wave of desire. Her eyes lit up. Forgetting everything else, she scurried into my room, making a beeline for the closet. I followed close behind, gently closing the door, sealing us off from the world. Good. The trap was set. The mouse had taken the cheese. The closet was filled with a dazzling array of children's clothes. My eyes scanned the racks and landed on the dress. A pure white, poofy tulle princess dress, its skirt layered with hand-sewn lace and tiny pearls that shimmered under the light. It was the exact same battle armor Mrs. Lin had handed me in my last life. "Here it is," I said, standing on my tiptoes to carefully lift the white dress off the hanger. I held it out to Daisy. The tulle skirt swayed in my hands like a floating cloud, like an expensive, blooming flower. Daisy's eyes went wide. Her breathing grew shallow, her small chest rising and falling as she stared, unable to look away. She looked like a starving wolf seeing fresh meat. She unconsciously reached out, her fingertips trembling, wanting to touch the smooth, expensive fabric. "Pretty, right?" I deliberately dangled the dress in front of her, the shimmer of the pearls flashing in her eyes. "My mom said a French designer made it. It's the only one in the whole world. It's so pretty." Daisy's voice was hoarse and tight, thick with undisguised longing and jealousy. She glanced down at her own shabby, worn-out floral dress, and a wave of shame and inferiority washed over her young face. The time was right. My smile became incredibly sincere and enthusiastic. My voice rose in exaggerated praise. "You know what, Daisy? I just realized this dress would look perfect on you." Daisy's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief, wild joy, and confusion. "Oh, really? Of course it's true." I nodded emphatically, my tone firm. "Look how clean and white it is. It makes your skin glow. And this skirt." I fluffed out the skirt, the tulle almost touching her face. "You'd look like a little fairy in this. Way better than me." I deliberately pouted, feigning a bit of disappointment. "It looks kind of weird on me. It just doesn't look as good as it would on you." Every word of my heartfelt speech landed perfectly on Daisy's fragile, swelling vanity. Her breathing quickened. Her cheeks flushed an unnatural red with excitement. The look in her eyes as she stared at the dress had turned into a desperate, possessive madness. But her last shred of reason was still fighting. Her voice was a tiny, guilty whisper. "It's your dress. Mrs. Lin would get so mad at me. Don't worry about it." I immediately struck a heroic pose, as if I could hold up the sky if it fell. I waved my hand dismissively. "We'll swap in secret. Just for a little while. Just so I can see what you look like. Please, Daisy." I started shaking her arm, unleashing my ultimate weapon. A super sweet, whiny plea. "I promise, just for a second. I just want to see what a real fairy looks like. Please. Pretty please? Pretty please." Those two words were the last straw. They shattered all of Daisy's defenses. The last bit of hesitation in her eyes was replaced by pure, triumphant joy. She even lifted her chin slightly, a condescending, patronizing look on her face, as if putting on this dress would truly make her a princess. "Well, okay," she said, trying to sound composed, but the excitement in her voice was overflowing. "Just for a little bit, okay? And you can't tell anyone." Uh-huh. I nodded like a bobblehead, a cold smile playing on my lips internally. "A little bit? Once you put it on, you'll never take it off." Daisy practically ripped her old dress off. I fought back a wave of disgust, putting on a smile of eager helpfulness as I helped her slip into the heavy, priceless white princess gown. It was a little big on her, loose at the waist, but the sheer, puffy magnificence of it was enough to make her dizzy. Her cheeks flushed with excitement as she rushed to the large, full-length mirror in the closet. She twirled and turned, greedily admiring the new person she saw in the reflection, wrapped in a dress that seemed to transform her. She even clumsily tried to mimic the ladies she'd seen on TV, lifting the hem of her skirt to attempt a curtsy, her face a mask of pure bliss. "So pretty," she whispered to herself, her eyes glazed over. Just then, ding dong, the clear sound of the doorbell chimed through the house like a death knell, right on schedule. "He's here." Every muscle in my body tensed. Blood rushed to my head, then turned to ice. My heart pounded in my chest, threatening to burst. He was here. The scar-faced demon. The harbinger of death from all my nightmares. "Oh. Someone's here," Daisy said, startled out of her daze by the bell. Her face showed a flash of annoyance and panic. She instinctively tried to hide behind me, a reaction born from a deep-seated fear of strangers, and the guilt of wearing something that wasn't hers. Don't worry, I said, grabbing her cold little hand, my face beaming with an unprecedented warmth. "It's probably for me. And you look so pretty. You can do me a favor, okay?" "A favor?" Daisy was a little dazed by my sudden enthusiasm, and I was holding her so tight she forgot to struggle. "Go open the door for me," I said, batting my eyes, trying to look as innocent and trusting as possible. "Just tell them you're the young miss of the family, that I'm upstairs changing, and I'll be right down. Go on. I half pushed, half shoved her toward the bedroom door with surprising strength. "Say I'm." Daisy was completely bewildered. A puppet in an expensive, ill-fitting princess dress, being pushed toward the door. Her face was a storm of shock, a secret, wild joy, and a deeper confusion and fear. The thought of impersonating the young miss of the family was both terrifying and thrilling. "Yes. Look at you. You're so pretty, you look more like the young miss than I do." I nodded, encouraging her. I twisted the doorknob and gave her a gentle push out. "Go on. Don't keep them waiting. And remember, your name is Scarlet. You are the young miss of the family." "Scarlet." Daisy repeated the name unconsciously. My name. The name that symbolized unimaginable wealth and endless love. Those two words were like a magic spell, igniting all the greed and ambition in her eyes. Her last bit of fear and hesitation vanished in the face of such a massive temptation. She straightened her small, thin shoulders, trying to imitate the posture of the rich girls she'd seen on TV. The timid, subservient look of a nanny's daughter was replaced by a forced, haughty expression. She took a deep breath and, step by step, walked firmly toward the stairs, toward the door that was about to open into hell. Clack, clack, clack. Her plastic sandals echoed on the polished marble steps, a hollow, piercing sound in the too quiet mansion. I stood in the shadows at the turn of the stairs, my small body pressed against the cold wall. I held my breath, my eyes fixed on the heavy, brass-handled, crimson front door below. My heart hammered, the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears. "Here we go." Downstairs, Mrs. Lynn's voice, deliberately high-pitched and fawning, rang out. "Oh, who is it?" "Coming, coming." Hurried footsteps, and then creak. The heavy wooden door swung open. Standing outside was a man in a dark blue work uniform and a matching baseball cap. The brim was pulled low, hiding most of his face, revealing only a hard, square jaw. He held a clipboard. His voice was intentionally low and flat, all business. "Checking the water meter." Mrs. Lynn sounded confused. "Is that him?" "But he's early." She instinctively leaned forward, trying to get a better look at his face. In that split second, everything changed. The water meter man snapped his head up. From under the brim of his cap, a hideous, centipede-like scar snaked from his left temple down to the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with a cold, bestial ferocity. He didn't give Mrs. Lynn a moment to react. He didn't even spare the nanny a glance. Like he had a built-in homing device, his gaze instantly locked onto the figure standing behind her, the one wearing the incredibly conspicuous, white, poofy princess dress. "That's her." A low, guttural sound rumbled in the man's throat, full of a predator's cruel excitement. He was a cheetah, coiled and ready to strike. He slammed into Mrs. Lynn, who was standing in the doorway with her mouth agape in shock. Mrs. Lynn let out a short scream as her plump body was thrown against the doorframe like a sack of potatoes, making a sickening thud. "Ah!" Daisy's shriek could have shattered glass. The fake arrogance on her face was instantly ripped away by pure terror. She finally realized the danger. Overwhelming fear made her instinctively turn to run. Too late. The scarred man moved like a blur. In one stride, he was on her. His rough hand clamped over her screaming mouth like an iron vice. His other arm wrapped around her waist, clad in its expensive white dress, and he roughly hoisted her under his arm like he was grabbing a chicken. Daisy's little legs, in their plastic sandals, kicked uselessly in the air. The expensive white dress was crumpled and ruined, smeared with dirt from the man's work uniform. Her eyes were wide with terror, tears streaming down her face as she made muffled, desperate whimpering sounds, her body convulsing in fear. "My Daisy." Mrs. Lynn finally recovered from the daze of being thrown. Seeing her daughter being taken, she let out a heart-wrenching howl and scrambled forward, trying to grab her back. "Let go of my daughter. Let her go, you monster." A flash of annoyance crossed the scarred man's face. Without even looking at the screaming woman, he kicked out. Thump. His foot connected squarely with Mrs. Lynn's fleshy stomach. "Oof." Mrs. Lynn grunted in pain, crumpling to the ground like a popped balloon, clutching her stomach. Her face went white, and all she could do was gasp for air, unable to utter another word. The entire thing was fast, precise, and brutal. From opening the door to grabbing the girl and kicking the nanny, it took no more than a few seconds. The scarred man, carrying the still struggling, whimpering Daisy like a rag doll, turned and bolted out the door. Outside, a dusty, unremarkable gray van was waiting, its side door already open. The man tossed the girl in the princess dress inside without a shred of care. Slam. The door was yanked shut. The van peeled out, kicking up a cloud of dust, and instantly disappeared into the traffic beyond the villa's driveway. In the mansion's living room, all that was left was Mrs. Lynn, collapsed on the floor, moaning in pain, her face a mess of snot and tears. The dust settled. I stood in the shadows on the second floor, my fingers digging into the carved wooden railing, my knuckles white from the force. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the ecstatic, draining flood of vengeance washing over me. It worked. It actually worked. Watching the van carrying the young miss of the family disappear from view, an unspeakable joy wrapped around my heart. Daisy, wearing my dress, taking my place, was dragged into the hell that was meant for me. Slowly, step by step, I walked down the stairs. My slippers made soft sounds on the polished marble, echoing clearly in the silent living room. Mrs. Lynn was still a heap of misery on the cold tile of the entryway. Hearing my footsteps, she struggled to lift her head. When she saw me, perfectly fine and completely calm, her tear-soaked eyes first widened in utter disbelief. Then, that disbelief morphed into a dawning horror, mixed with a towering, terrifying hatred. "It was you. You. You little bitch. You did this to my Daisy. You'll rot in hell for this. She shrieked, trying to lunge at me and strangle me. Mrs. Lynn, what are you talking about? I stopped a few feet away from her, tilting my head, my face a perfect mask of 8-year-old confusion and innocence. My voice was soft. I was just upstairs changing. Where did Daisy go? Why did she run outside in my new dress? Is she going somewhere to play? Are there bad people outside? I'm scared. I deliberately enunciated the words my new dress, slowly and clearly. My feigned ignorance made Mrs. Lynn choke, as if she was about to have a stroke. The muscles in her face twitched violently, her eyes like poison daggers that wanted to slice me to pieces. She opened her mouth, but only a strangled, wheezing sound came out. She couldn't say a word. What could she say? That her daughter pretended to be the young miss to open the door? That she herself had hired the kidnapper? The immense terror and despair finally broke her. She stopped looking at me and just collapsed on the floor, wailing, beating her chest. My Daisy! My daughter! Oh God! What am I going to do? Her cries were shrill and hopeless, echoing through the vast, luxurious living room. I watched her, snot-nosed and hysterical, with nothing but cold indifference. Go on, cry. This is just the beginning. Your daughter's new life is just getting started. I walked around the pathetic heap that was Mrs. Lynn, and went straight to an inconspicuous corner of the living room where an old, push-button landline phone sat. This was the phone Mrs. Lynn used to contact the outside world, including the scarred kidnapper. In my past life, she had used this phone to check on her cargo and to spew venomous threats at me whenever I tried to escape. I picked up the receiver. The cool, heavy plastic felt solid in my hand. Relying on the number I had been forced to memorize through countless beatings and curses, I extended my small finger and slowly, deliberately, punched in the digits. The beeping of the dial tone echoed in my ears. After a few seconds, the call connected. Yeah. A low voice answered, deliberately hushed, with a thick regional accent and a hint of impatience. It was him. Scarface. I took a deep breath, pressing the receiver tightly to my mouth. In a voice that was chillingly cold and clear for a child, I spoke, enunciating every word. The package has been received. The other end of the line went dead silent, except for the sound of heavy, suppressed breathing. Clearly, Scarface was stunned by the sudden, impossibly eerie child's voice on the line. Who is this? He asked after a few seconds, his voice laced with suspicion and a barely perceptible panic. You don't need to know who I am, I said, my voice flat, as if stating a fact that had nothing to do with me. I'm just telling you, the package in your van is worth this much. I named a price far higher than what Mrs. Lynn had promised him in my last life. A number that would make any greedy man take a deadly risk. Silence again from the other end, but his breathing was noticeably heavier, faster. The stench of his greed practically seeped through the phone line. Triple it, I continued, my voice as cold as ice, with a commanding tone that allowed no argument. Sell her to the farthest, poorest, most inescapable place you can find. Let her rot there for the rest of her life. Don't you ever let her crawl back. Not a single strand of hair. Do you understand? I emphasized the last part, my voice carrying a terrifying, bone-chilling menace that was completely out of place in a child's body. There was a longer silence on the other end. I could imagine the war raging in his mind between his greed and his fear of the unknown. In the end, greed won. Understood. Scarface's voice was hoarse, filled with a reckless, go-for-broke finality. The account number? He rattled off a string of digits. Wait for it, I said coolly, and hung up the phone with a decisive click. Then, I found the number in the recent calls list and firmly pressed delete. Action successful. I put down the receiver and ran back to my bedroom, to the huge LCD TV. I pulled a kid's smartphone out of a drawer and opened a payment app. The amount of money an 8-year-old like me had for an allowance was enough to make a normal family's head spin. I entered the account number and the amount, the long string of zeros dizzying to look at. The final step. Payment. I extended my small index finger and, without a moment's hesitation, pressed it on the fingerprint payment icon. Beep. Payment successful. The cold notification on the screen felt like the last nail being hammered into Daisy's coffin. After I was done, I walked back out to the living room and stood over Mrs. Lin, looking down at her tear-streaked, despairing face. Mrs. Lin? I crouched down, leaning in close, the same innocent, 8-year-old smile back on my face. My voice was soft and sweet. Did Daisy go out to play in my new dress? I watched her pupils contract and her face twist in horror. I smiled even more sweetly. I bet she's having a wonderful time. 10 years flew by in the blink of an eye. Giant crystal chandeliers bathed the ballroom in a light as bright as day. The air was thick with the scent of expensive champagne and high-end perfume. It was a sea of glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. Tonight was the 18th birthday party for Scarlett, the sole heiress of the family. It was also her official debut as the successor to a billion-dollar empire. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite. I was wearing a custom-made 7-figure, ice blue strapless gown. The fine diamonds on the skirt shimmering like a frozen river of stars with every step I took. Around my neck was the Shen family's ancestral pigeon's blood ruby necklace, making my skin look as white as snow. I stood with my arm linked through my father's, a perfect smile on my lips, gracefully accepting the gazes of astonishment, admiration, and curiosity from all around me. 10 years. The small, cold girl hiding in the shadows of the second-floor landing had grown into the poised heiress of the Shen family, in complete control of her world. For 10 years, I had grown like a vine, feeding on hatred and nutrients, quietly wrapping myself around everything, sinking my roots deep, and climbing ever upward. Mrs. Lin, the once vicious nanny, had long since suffered a complete mental breakdown from the shock of her daughter's disappearance and my special care. She now spent her days in a private room at a high-end psychiatric hospital, dressed in a striped patient's gown, screaming and cursing at the air, completely cut off from the world. As for Daisy, or rather, the package sold to a remote, forgotten mountain village on the southwestern border, a place you could barely find on a map, my people sent me a cold, detailed report every year. It chronicled her transformation from a terrified, struggling girl into a numb, withered woman, living like livestock in a pen. In the photos, she wore rags of an indiscernible color, holding an equally filthy baby, standing in front of a dilapidated mud brick hut. Behind her, the mountains stretched on endlessly, an inescapable prison. The eyes that were once filled with greed were now just 2 pits of bottomless despair and death. Perfect. This was exactly what I wanted. Happy birthday, Scarlett. A deep, pleasant male voice spoke beside me. I turned to meet Ethan Cole's smiling eyes. He was the heir to the Cole Corporation, my childhood friend and fiancé. And in my last life, the man Daisy had stolen from me. Tonight, he was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, looking sharp and distinguished. He looked at me with a focused, gentle gaze, full of undisguised admiration. Thank you, Ethan, I replied with a small smile, though a flicker of cold scrutiny passed through my eyes. In my past life, he had chosen the girl calling herself Bella Daisy. That betrayal was a thorn buried deep in my heart. For the past 10 years, he had been a perfect, doting partner, but my trust had been shattered by the ending of my previous life. I enjoyed his pursuit and used his resources, but I never once gave him my heart. There was no room for emotion in this game. Time to cut the cake, sweetheart, my mother said, gently patting my hand, her voice full of love. I smiled and walked toward the center of the hall, where a 9-tier fantastical cake stood. My crystal heels clicked on the polished floor, every step drawing the attention of the entire room. A waiter respectfully handed me a silver cake knife wrapped in a silk ribbon. Just as my fingertips were about to touch the handle, the 2 heavy, gold-leaf doors of the ballroom were thrown open from the outside with tremendous force. Bang! The loud noise was like a thunderclap, shattering the elegant music and quiet chatter. Everyone's gaze, startled, confused, and a little annoyed, shot to the entrance. Silhouetted against the bright lights of the hallway, a figure stumbled in. It was a young woman, or rather, the shadow of one. She was terrifyingly thin, like a skeleton draped in human skin. She wore an ill-fitting, cheap, off-white knockoff Chanel jacket, so stiff it looked like it had been washed 100 times, its edges frayed and pilling. The oversized shoulders slumped, making her look even more gaunt. Underneath was an equally old, faded dress. Below the hem, a pair of scuffed mud-caked, low-quality heels were visible. Her hair was dry and yellowed, like a tangled mess of straw pulled back from her face, revealing high, sharp cheekbones. Her face was bloodless, her lips chapped and peeling. But her eyes were bloodshot and blazing with a wild, hysterical fire that was fixed squarely on me. I'd recognize that face even if it were burned to ash. Daisy, or as she now called herself, Bella. She had come back, like a demon crawling out of the depths of hell. The ballroom fell into a dead silence. The air felt thick, every breath audible. Everyone was stunned by the sudden, shocking spectacle. Bella's gaze was like a poisoned hook, reaching across the stunned crowd to latch onto my face. Her chest heaved. Her thin, trembling fingers rose, and with all her strength, with a hatred that could have ground my bones to dust, she pointed directly at me. Her shrill, piercing shriek cut through the silence, thick with the stench of some backwater mountain village. The last two words were a desperate, throat-tearing scream, carrying the metallic tang of blood, echoing under the magnificent crystal chandeliers, filled with a surreal, horrifying drama. A moment of silence, then an uproar, like a tidal wave, crashed through the ballroom. Oh my God, what's going on? Didn't they say Scarlet was the real one? Who is this woman? Is she crazy? Security. Where's security? Wait, did she say switched at birth? Shock, suspicion, morbid curiosity. 1,000 pairs of eyes darted between me and the crazed woman at the door. The whispers swelled into a deafening roar. Camera flashes went off like machine guns as reporters, smelling blood, pushed their way to the front. My father's face darkened, a storm cloud gathering. His sharp eyes scanned the scene, his gaze finally landing on me, full of unquestioning protection. My mother clutched my arm, her face pale but her eyes filled with rage. Ethan immediately stepped to my side, subtly shielding me with his body. His brow furrowed as he stared down the woman calling herself Bella with a cold, warning glare. I stood my ground, my ice blue dress rippling slightly in the disturbed air. The polite smile never left my face, not even for a second. So she's back from the dead. My dear sister has finally crawled out of her pigsty. Too bad. She only crawled out to be utterly destroyed. Under the countless stares, under Bella's crazed, triumphant gaze, I calmly and elegantly picked up a champagne flute from a nearby waiter's tray. The golden liquid swirled, catching the light. I didn't look at her. I just lowered my eyes, as if admiring the bubbles in my glass. Then I looked up, a faint, cold smile playing on my lips. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise of the room, laced with a pitying, all-knowing condescension. Sweetheart, I said, swirling the glass. The bubbles rose and popped. That pigsty stench on you. Not even Hermes can cover that up. Those light, airy words were the most vicious curse, striking right at the heart of Bella's most shameful, terrifying secret, the past she was so desperate to bury. The fake confidence and triumph on her face instantly crumbled. The color drained from her sallow cheeks, leaving them as white as paper. Ijurelain. You're slandering me. She shrieked, her voice high and shrill, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. It was a desperate, hysterical sound. I'm Bella. I'm the heiress. You're just jealous. You're framing me. Dad. Don't believe her. She's the fake. That's enough. My father roared. His powerful voice, filled with thunderous rage, instantly silenced the room. His face was livid, a vein throbbing in his forehead. His eyes, sharp as knives, shot past the deranged woman at the door and landed on me, full of protection. Scarlet, he said, his voice deep. What is going on? All eyes turned back to me. I set down my champagne glass. The smile was gone from my face, replaced by a calm, solemn gravity. I slowly pulled a tiny, silver, ornament-like USB drive from my clutch. Father, mother, esteemed guests, my voice was clear and steady, with just the right amount of sorrow. I apologize that you all had to witness such a farce. There are some scars I never wanted to reopen. But at this point, for the honor of my parents, for the integrity of the family, and to make certain people finally give up all hope, my eyes swept over the terrified woman at the door. I have no choice but to reveal a truth that has been buried for 10 years. I handed the USB drive to our butler, who was already standing by, his face equally grim. He quickly walked to the control console. A few seconds later, the giant high-definition screens on either side of the ballroom, which had been displaying a heartwarming slideshow of my childhood photos, flickered and changed. A crystal-clear audio recording began to play, the voices enhanced for clarity. First, a middle-aged woman's voice, deliberately lowered, dripping with a fawning, calculating tone. "Don't you worry, Scarface. The girl's a real looker. The family's only treasure. She's priceless. Yeah, the one in the white dress. You just stick to the plan. I'll get the door. I guarantee it'll be perfect. The money same as always. 500,000. You take the girl, the money's in your account. Remember, the one in the white dress. Don't get it wrong." After a burst of static, a different, rougher male voice spoke, tinged with impatience. I know. Stop nagging. The one in the white dress, the family's little missy, right? Fine. I'll be waiting." The recording ended. The short clip, just a few dozen seconds long, was like a bomb dropped on the ballroom. The amount of information was staggering. The one in the white dress, the family's little missy, the nanny will get the door, $500,000. A deal? A silence even more profound and heavy than before fell over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. Then a tidal wave of gasps and shocked murmurs. My God, that's a kidnapping plot. That's the nanny's voice. I recognize it. The Lynn woman who used to work. She conspired with a kidnapper to sell the real heiress? Then the one at the door. The one in the white dress. The one who was taken. Does that mean this crazy woman at the door is the nanny's daughter? Every gaze in the room instantly shifted from shock to pure disgust, contempt, and revulsion. They were like 1,000 invisible daggers, all aimed at the woman at the door who called herself Bella. It was as if her bones had been ripped out, as if she'd been stripped naked and thrown into a blizzard. Her skeletal body began to tremble violently. The deathly white of her face turned to a hopeless, ashen gray. Her mouth hung open, and a choked, dying sob escaped her throat, but she couldn't form a single word. The evidence was irrefutable. Her carefully planned comeback, her dramatic accusation that she thought would win her everything, had, with the playing of that recording, become the final nail in her own coffin. No. It's fake. The recording is fake, she whispered, her voice broken, barely audible above the rising clamor. My father's face was so dark it looked like it could drip ink, the veins on his forehead bulging. He whipped his head around, his eyes like ice picks, and glared at Mrs. Lynn, who had long since collapsed in a heap in a corner of the room, invited as a former employee. My mother covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she looked at me, her eyes filled with endless relief and heartbreak, which quickly turned to pure rage directed at the woman at the door. Ethan's eyes were like chips of ice. He took another step, completely shielding me, and spoke to the security team. Get this lunatic who is disrupting this event and slandering my fiancé out of here. Now. Several burly security guards, already on alert, rushed forward like wolves. Get off me. Don't touch me. I'm Bella. I'm the real one. You've all been tricked by her. Bella let out a final, desperate, piercing scream, fighting with all her might, her nails scratching bloody lines on the guards' arms. It was useless. They mercilessly grabbed her by the arms and lifted her off the ground. She was dragged out, kicking, screaming, cursing, and wailing, like a bag of trash. The ill-fitting, knock-off Chanel jacket slipped off in the struggle, revealing the even more tattered and pathetic dress underneath. It was like a piece of gold foil that had been crudely stuck onto a piece of rotten wood, looking utterly pathetic in the bright lights. The heavy door, the symbol of high society's barrier, slammed shut behind her, cutting off all her madness and despair, and sealing out the countless prying camera lenses that were surely waiting outside. The ballroom was silent once more, but the atmosphere was completely different. A complex mix of shock and sympathy filled the air. I stood there, my ice blue gown like a glacier under the moonlight, exuding an untouchable coldness. There was no joy of victory on my face, only a vast, chilling indifference. It's over? No. This was just the beginning. A demon that crawls out of a pigsty must be driven back to hell for good. After that, the story of Bella circulated among the elite as a cautionary tale about bad nannies. She became a rat in the gutter. Blacklisted by both the Shun and Cole families, no company would hire her. The apartment she rented would have its water and power coincidentally cut off. If she walked down the street, Concerned citizens would report her for suspicious behavior. She tried to spread her truth online, but any post she made lasted less than 3 seconds before her account was vaporized. With nowhere to go, she started acting like a true madwoman, holding a crooked cardboard sign that read Scarlet is an imposter. Give me back my life, and pacing in front of the corporation's gleaming skyscraper, screaming and cursing at the air. Of course, she was always escorted away within 10 minutes. Photos would occasionally surface online. In them, her hair was more matted, her face more gray. The old jacket was now just a collection of rags. Her eyes were as empty as 2 dry wells. And then she disappeared. Some said they saw her in a rougher part of town. Others said she tried to hop a freight train to leave the city. The rumors flew, but no one really cared. Until one dreary afternoon, about a month later, I was in the top-floor conference room of the corporation, finalizing an overseas acquisition with several senior executives. The sunlight was filtered through a thick layer of clouds, casting hard, cold light on the polished table. My phone vibrated silently on the desk. The screen lit up with a call from the head of security. I answered it, putting it on speaker. The security chief's voice was tense, with an undercurrent of alarm. There's a situation downstairs. That woman. Daisy Lynn. She's climbed onto the roof of the trade building across the street. She's very agitated. And there are reporters everywhere. The conference room fell silent. You could hear a pin drop. The executives exchanged nervous glances. I picked up my porcelain coffee cup and took a sip, my eyes drifting out the window. Across the wide street, I could clearly see the trade building's rooftop. On the edge, a tiny, teetering black dot was waving its arms frantically. Below, a crowd of ant-like people had gathered. The wail of sirens grew closer, tearing through the heavy air. Countless telephoto lenses were aimed at that black dot. Understood, I said, my voice calm, betraying no emotion. I hung up and picked up my personal phone. My fingers tapped the screen, opening a familiar live streaming app. The top story on the homepage had a sensational headline. I clicked on it. The video was shaky, filled with the gasps of the reporter, and the noise of the crowd below. The camera zoomed in, focusing on the figure at the edge of the roof. It was too far to see her expression, only her thin body shaking violently in the wind, dozens of stories high. The wind whipped at her ragged clothes, as if it could sweep her away at any moment. The comment section was already on fire. Holy crap, it's really her. The imposter. Jump. If you've got the guts, then jump. Just trying to get attention. What did the family do to her? She looks so pathetic. To the person above, get lost you bleeding heart. Her mom was an accomplice to a kidnapper. She deserves this. Where's Scarlet? Say something. A high society drama. Damn, better than TV. The noise was deafening. Just then, the figure on the roof seemed to see something on a massive electronic billboard below. Or maybe she heard a megaphone. She suddenly stopped waving her arms. Her body went rigid for a second. Then a shriek, so shrill it barely sounded human, pierced through the wind and the noise, faintly audible through the live stream. Scarlet. I'll haunt you even as a ghost. The voice was filled with a deep, bitter resentment, like the curse of a vengeful spirit. The conference room was silent. Everyone held their breath, looking at me with complicated expressions. I set down my coffee cup. The base made a sharp clink against the tabletop. Then, as my executives stared in stunned silence, I picked up my phone and tapped the Join Live function on the stream. My account had the platform's highest-level diamond icon, with a prominent official verification. Scarlet, Director, Shin Corporation. The request to join was accepted almost instantly by the excited producer. The live stream immediately split into 2 screens. One half showed the desperate figure in the high-altitude wind. The other half showed me. The high-definition screen clearly displayed my face. My makeup was flawless. I wore a white couture suit, a simple but priceless diamond brooch pinned to the collar. My background was the corporation's top-floor conference room, with its massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. It was a cruel contrast of heaven and hell against the pathetic, desperate scene on the opposite rooftop. The comment section exploded. The servers nearly crashed. This vibe, this contrast, epic. The real miss has entered the chat. Look. Look at the crazy woman. She sees the split screen. Her face. On the screen, Daisy on the rooftop had clearly seen me appear. Her body went stiff, as if struck by lightning. Her gaunt, desperate face twisted into a grotesque mask. Her eyes bulged, almost seeming to crack, filled with a churning vortex of venomous hatred and the madness of someone who has been utterly crushed, with no hope of ever getting up. Scarlet. She shrieked again, her voice distorted by pure hate. You'll die a horrible death. I'll be waiting for you in hell. I faced the camera and slowly, a smile bloomed on my face. It was a perfect, flawless smile. The curve of my lips was just right, showing 8 perfectly white teeth. It was the standard, elegant smile of a high society debutante. But my eyes held no warmth, only the cold indifference of someone looking down at an ant. I leaned slightly closer to the phone's microphone, making sure every word would be transmitted with perfect clarity to the live stream audience, to the hysterical woman across the street, to every single spectator. My voice was clear and melodious, with a strange, soothing quality. But every word was a knife. The Family Foundation has always been dedicated to supporting the mental health of vulnerable communities. I paused, my calm gaze piercing through the screen, seemingly meeting the burning, insane eyes on the rooftop. So today, we are proud to sponsor the city's Serenity Funeral Services. The perfect curve of my lips deepened slightly, tinged with a compassionate, saint-like mercy. Jump, and the burial is on us. Daisy's scream stopped abruptly. She stood on the edge of the roof, shaking, as if my words had shattered the last of her sanity. The comment section blew up. Damn, she goes straight for the kill. A free funeral, LMAO. And then, complete silence. Why isn't the crazy lady jumping? I thought she wanted to be a vengeful ghost. The next second, she let out a final, heart-rending howl and started to back away from the edge. Maybe she'd been standing too long. Her legs gave out. She stumbled forward. Thud. The live stream feed was immediately cut. But everyone knew what had happened. I elegantly closed my phone. Let's continue the meeting, I said with a small smile to my dumbfounded executives. 3 days later, Mrs. Lin heard the news of her daughter's death in the psychiatric hospital. That night, she hanged herself with a bedsheet. And for my 19th birthday present, my father personally handed me the transfer documents for a 30% stake in the corporation. You've earned this, he said, his voice full of love. I stroked the gold-embossed file, my smile sweet and harmless. In this life, I finally took back everything that was mine. The end.